absolute honor and pleasure to welcome to the UltraRunning Magazine podcast, coming to us from Boulder County, just outside Boulder in Colorado is Kelly Newlon, and hailing to us from France is Stephanie Howe. Oh my goodness. Ladies, thank you so much for joining the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us on, Scotty.
You guys have worked together collaboratively in different areas, so people may be already familiar with your names and your voices and who you are. But I would love to start off by asking you both, how do you guys come into contact with each other? Where did this friendship start?
It's funny because Kelly and I just met in person this last year, but we've known each other for forever. So it's kind of like, one of those things where this is a great use of technology because I think well, I've admired Kelly for a long time and like the content that she's put out, the way she's put food together for athletes. And I think we first connected in 2019, just over something benign of like, I'm not even sure what it was, but we just realized we had so much in common and always on the back burner kind of like talked about working together in some capacity. And over the years, we've just kind of figured out how to do that. And it's been really cool because we've got very different backgrounds in the same subject. So nutrition, and that, I've got like the science background. She's got the like practical, like putting the food together. And it's been really fun to work together. And plus we just get along really well. So that's, I guess, the evolution that I remember of our working relationship and friendship.
Kelly, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I feel like that timeline definitely lines up. And it was probably one of us like commented on something on Instagram that the other had posted and it just started that banter. And then we just became friends. Then we became like better friends, just again over social media, which is, I guess, the way to do it nowadays. Um, and then, yeah, there was always the underlying conversation of like, clearly we should do something together. Let's try and see what that looks like. And then we have this kind of pie in the sky goal that we want to do. And we're like, well, let's just try it this way first, baby steps, and see if we work well together. And sure enough, we work well together. And then, yeah, I think it was last year at the USCA conference, maybe. Was that the first time we actually met?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And then just recently, Stephanie was back in the US, so I was able to have her up for dinner at our house. And but yeah, we work well together. We enjoy bouncing things off of each other. I'm really fortunate to have Stephanie as kind of my phone a friend. If I'm on a road expedition with an athlete for an extended time and I am trying to figure something out, Stephanie is my go-to RD to call. And we've again been really fortunate to have a mutual client to work on together in France this past summer. And yeah, that was every day and everything that we work together on just brings us closer together as friends as well.
Wow, what a mutually amazing relationship and friendship you two have developed over these years. That you guys complement each other so very well. It's like the universe has provided and brought you guys together, and just the wealth of knowledge that you guys share to athletes to help them perform better is nothing short of just kind of magical for me. So I love hearing the story how you two connected and made it work. It's a lot of hard work, especially remotely from each other, but also you get to drill down, I suppose, right to the nuts and bolts of what you're trying to achieve. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's pretty cool. Just how we work together and we have like the complement of like and like as Kelly said, like, she's my like phone a friend too. Like I have these ideas of like what an athlete needs, but I don't always know how to put it together or to make it like actually like look presentable. And Kelly is brilliant at that.
Kelly, you on top of all the many hats that you wear, from a chef's hat to a runner's hat to being outdoors and everything else, you also, part of RAD, Real Athlete Diets, is that you are an agent for athletes. So one of those people includes Tara Dower, who just punched herself a golden ticket to Western States over at Black Canyon, set the FKT, oh my gosh, on the Appalachia Trail. Stunning performances. Just this is since fall of last year, all this has happened with all the success. So I have to imagine that you are part of her training, of getting her ready to go for these events. Am I right about that?
You are not.
Really? Is that correct?
No, I'm glad you asked this question though, and that's why I sort of allowed you to do it. So thank you for allowing me to throw you under the bus. Um, no, I am actually not. She works with Vic, what's his last name, of um, Mountain Sports dietitian, Vic. And very specifically, like Tara and I have talked about food and that sort of thing on a like regular basis, but because I'm always in her ear wearing my like manager agent hat, it became really clear very quickly that that needed to go to someone else because otherwise it would just be me in her ear all the time. So it made sense to separate that, but it is something that I touch base with her on and ask, like, how's it going? What's in your refrigerator? Like, how's it going with Vic? Vic and I have also connected, which is great, because Tara, it's not uncommon for me to see her. She lives in Colorado too. So, but I will say, to answer your question as far as, her food and patterns and practices between the Appalachian Trail and now have changed drastically. And that's because Vic has her practicing and learning, not just doing things, but actually learning and understanding kind of the sort of error of her ways beforehand and focusing on fueling for the race while she's training, and that just being sort of a life skill and a habit to what she's doing. Just and she tries everything out, and it's just constant. The way she fuels for a race is how she trains.
Hmm.
And then the daily food as well. I think there's just layers to it. Tara's young. She just moved across the country on her own. So it's different when you're trying to feed yourself and what you have on hand and keeping things stocked at home. So it's layers of things, but I know that Vic works with her on that. So I cannot take the credit, but I am happy to see that it's all unfolding.
And what was that like for you to see her just throw down at Black Canyons, just the other weekend?
Oh gosh, emotional and anytime, whether it's a hard day or a really exceptionally positive day, I'm an emotionally driven person, so I'm always overflowing with whatever the emotion is. I was really happy for her, and there's a lot of doubt and naysayers of, Sarah's kind of doing things a little bit backwards, whereas often we see kind of that a long FKT attempt and accomplishment sort of being the end of someone's career. And she did some racing before, but she really loves that long trail format. So for her to put it in, it's because she just truly loves to do that. So I think a lot of people sort of pigeonholed her into that category. And I know Tara is a racer before that. She's got second at Run Rabbit. She's won Run Rabbit. She was fourth at Hard Rock. She loves to run fast. So I knew that she had those wheels. And there's nothing like doubt to fuel someone else's doubt of you to fuel that fire. So it was nice to see that.
Stephanie, for you, just from an athlete's point of view, what was your impression of her reaction when she nailed that FKT on the Appalachia Trail?
I mean, just incredible. I have some context for doing things like that, but I've never done anything like that because it's really freaking hard. And to watch her do that and like, I mean, I don't know her personally, but like, same as Kelly, like get really emotional and like, you can't help but just root for her. Anytime a woman is doing something amazing like that, I just get so invested and so behind it and really happy to see her then come back and throw down at Black Canyon. That was also really cool.
Mm-hmm. It's really women's performance. And I know you do a lot of work with women in science, Stephanie, and I hope that's something we can talk to at a later date, because it is so important. I don't know if it's being talked about enough. Quite frankly, it's been fascinating to me just the success that women have been having in ultra racing this past year with Paris and her performance over at Barkley Marathons. Um, how has that been for you, women in sports? These just past few years, it's just been a whole new level of running.
Yeah, it's an exciting time to be a woman in sport and to be a fan of women in sport. Um, Partially because I think it's becoming more equal. It's not equal, but it's becoming more equal in terms of like accessibility and like if you look at a start line, there's more than four women on the start line. So that in itself is just raising the bar, right? And like, one woman does something and that inspires like 10 more to like shoot for that. And then it raises it even further. So the glass ceiling is just shattering and it's a really cool thing to be a part of. And I think it's going to continue to rise because women are behind men in the sport. Just historically speaking of how men's and women's sports have evolved over time. And so I think we're going to continue to see that. And I love the momentum. I love seeing course records being broken. I love seeing women like supporting each other, competing against each other, just kind of like I see it as like you don't have to put other people's light out to make everything brighter. So like the more candles that are burning, the brighter it is, and that's really cool.
Mhm. Awesome. I love hearing that answer. So let's get into the main topic at hand here, you guys, which is, we want to set people up for success for just their nutrition. And so what a great opportunity it is to talk to you both about what we should eat and why we should eat it and how we can benefit from that in our training blocks. And so I guess we'll start with you, Stephanie. Kind of going off script here. I sent you questions prior, but what what do you think are like key things that nutritionally we need to get in as athletes day to day?
So I think a lot of athletes fall in this category of like they just don't fuel their bodies correctly because they're confused, because there's so much misinformation out there. So they're trying to fit their diet into these little boxes that they view as like the ideal way to fuel. And it's not usually based on science. It's restrictive, and it's kind of those diets, I'm using air quotes, are set just arbitrarily to be like a shiny object to attract people. And so I see that all the time. A lot of what I do is debunking myths for people of like, no, actually, you do need these foods, or actually, you do need to eat, or actually, starving yourself isn't going to work. And so for most people, what I do is take a big step back and help them realize that food is not the enemy. Like we need food to fuel our bodies. And we should think of food as fuel, but we should also enjoy it. Like it's important to enjoy what you're eating, not be fearful of it, not treat it as like, it's not a bank statement that you're like, or a checkbook you're trying to balance like calories in, calories out. It should be an enjoyable experience. So that's one thing that is kind of like my end goal.
Mm-hmm.
Is to help facilitate a better relationship with food. Now, within that, obviously, there are things that are going to help you and things that are maybe going to hold you back. And that's my job kind of behind the scenes to look at the numbers, to look at the composition, to give someone an idea of what they should be eating. And I never give like, I mean, I do use numbers, but I'll never have an athlete like count calories or grams. Instead, I start with like looking at what they're getting and like, let's work with this framework. These are things you're eating that work well for you. These are things that maybe work not so well. Let's change it up. So instead of having this for breakfast, why don't we have like, have your normal toast, but let's throw two eggs in there so we get some protein. Or for lunch, maybe add some cheese or hummus to get a little bit of fat in your vegetable wrap. So it's like taking what someone is eating and teaching them what they need to make it a better meal. Because even if I were to give someone a meal plan and like they would follow it to a T and weigh their foods out, like for one, that's exhausting. But two, they're not going to work with me for the rest of their lives, right? So it doesn't do them any favors to just give them like a list of foods or meals to follow. It's much better to teach them how to eat so that they can continue to do it. and recognize that food and eating should be mostly good, like aim for a B plus, but it's okay to color outside the lines a little bit. And
Mhm.
this is where Kelly is great too, of like, I say these things like, yeah, you want to just eat a rice bowl for lunch. And then oftentimes it's like, there's that missing link of like a rice bowl versus like, how do you actually put this together?
Mhm.
But going back to your original question, I think most athletes could benefit from reviewing what they're eating and learning what they need based on who they are, what phase in their life and training they're in, a bit about their demographics, genetics, and then refine it so that they are eating a little bit better most of the time. And that can happen in a number of ways, but that's usually how I start when I first meet and work with an athlete.
Mhm. Um, Kelly, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, right before right before Stephanie, per usual, was starting to give me accolades for doing something. In my head, I was like, oh my gosh, Stephanie is so good at doing this. And again, I'm so fortunate to have worked with Stephanie. We had a client this past year that I think it was like 35 days straight that I was with the client, and it was in France, so I was constantly calling. I'd be like, pull over on the side of the road in some farm field in the country, some side, called Stephanie. I'm like, this is where we are. This is what's going on, and oh my God, it's working. This is totally working, and here are the things that are happening, and just taking those. I love that what you said, Stephanie, about reviewing and then refining, and it's kind of I think doing that in the beginning and then just kind of on repeat casually, like, as things go on, as athletes working on things, that's one of the things that I've really learned from Stephanie is just to kind of like, and again, I was really lucky to be with the athlete. Like, not every athlete is able to have a professional chef and a registered dietitian at their beck and call, but this one was so extraordinary. And Scotty, I think when you and I had spoken the last time about a particular athlete that all of a sudden there was like a huge light bulb moment. But it was, and that was because of the work that Stephanie and I did together, but also Stephanie just being like, just keep at it. It's like so much in life and in running or in sport in general, it's that consistency of doing these things on a regular basis to the point where it just becomes habitual. So it's just the norm, and then that makes it easier. And then all of a sudden, the day that the athlete's like, I think I'm actually hungry. I don't know that I've allowed myself to feel hunger in years. Um, I remember that so vividly. I remember where I was, remember like what was in the farm field that I pulled over to call Stephanie and tell her that. And that led to the end goal of the athlete just not having so many restrictions in their mind. And it was all because of that, just kind of like, again, that reviewing and refining and reviewing and refining, but in between that, actually enjoying the food. And at the end of that expedition, the athlete's goal, sure, she had this big, goal as far as being an athlete, but the overall goal that the entire team knew was the goal was to have a full fat animal protein milk latte and a croissant with gluten in it, all together like at a cafe. And the whole team was like, we're doing this. And that was because of all of these tools that Stephanie had laid out.
Wow. Wow. That seems like such like a really that's the goal, but just how impressively we can kind of get down these rabbit holes of being restrictive of what we'll allow ourselves to eat. And I know I've been stuck there more times than I can count, to my disadvantage. I want to ask you, Stephanie, you brought up there are lots of myths out there that a lot of us kind of hold on to that are doing us a massive disservice, about whether it's diet or the food we take in. What are some common myths that you see a lot when working with people?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the month of the year of like what's going on and what's being put out there. But it can be anything from like low carbohydrate or carbohydrate restriction surrounding exercise. It can be like avoiding certain foods because they're inflammatory or they, aren't good for an athlete, like gluten, processed food. Um, from the other for the other perspective, avoiding any animal protein or low protein in general, just because of being fearful of either the protein or the fat content. I mean, I've seen it all. Like throw out fat, throw out carbohydrate, avoid protein. It's just kind of like those things are easy to latch onto. And I think the best way to fuel is super boring, right? It's not sexy to be like, okay, I just got to like eat a balanced diet consistently. Or if you hear like the shiny, like just eat these 5 foods on repeat and you'll like gain 20 pounds of muscle and then be able to run a 3-minute mile or whatever it is. Like that sounds attractive, right? And so our brains tend to go there. And I like to think about it as like a different, like an area of life I don't know that much about. So whatever, like computers or cars. Like if somebody says like, yeah, you can get this Intel processor with blah 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 blah, I'm like, oh, that sounds really great, but I don't really understand the inner workings of that. So I need someone to explain it to me, like why that doesn't work. Same thing with nutrition. When we understand metabolism or how food works, or how like the end fate of any carbohydrate is glucose, then we become less fearful of something like sugar, because we understand that everything becomes sugar before absorption. So it's kind of a roundabout way to answer your question, but I kind of see it all. And the way that I work through that is I bring it back to the science, I bring it back to what we know. And I'm not so black and white with that, because I know there are things that we still don't know about the body and nutrition. We know a lot, but there's things that we don't know. And then there's individuality within all of that. So I might feel good eating a certain food, but somebody else might not. And they might need to find a different way of eating or a different structure, or their macronutrients might be slightly different. Like it's not like you need to follow this rigid plan. That's the other piece. I think people assume athletes are really rigid and restrictive, and I don't think they have to be. I think the best the best way to think of nutrition is to approach it with some intention, but then to be a little bit like just not strict about it. Like let yourself kind of like ebb and flow a little bit and not stress about it. So eat a meal and then move on with life rather than dwelling on it.
You're going to hear a lot, folks, the words macro nutrient, micronutrient, without going down that long hole of those and why they're important. But can you just tell folks, just generally speaking, what's a macronutrient and what's a micronutrient, so they can identify, okay, I'm doing this and I'm not doing that?
Yeah, for sure. So a macronutrient is a food or nutrient that contains energy. And so the groups of macronutrients are carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And almost every food has some of each of those macronutrients in them. They just tend to be higher in one versus another. Micronutrients don't have any calories or energy associated with them. Those are things like vitamins, minerals, and fiber. They're just as important because they are catalysts in our body for a lot of different things that need to happen in metabolism, but they don't contain any of the energy that we need. So when we think about building a good nutrition plan, we want to think about both aspects. But a lot of times, if you just focus on the macronutrients, you get the micronutrients that you need within those real food options.
Okay. So looking at like what's a high level overview of what an ultra runner's diet should look like, just sort of day to day, without getting into what they need to do on race day, that sort of thing.
So it does depend on the person in terms of like numbers, right? So I can't say you need to eat X number of calories per day. But in general, we know that the energy output for an ultra runner is pretty high, and not just the energy during the sessions, but also for the recovery afterwards. So sometimes we forget about that, right? You do a 3-hour run, whatever energy is used, but there's actually the recovery piece after. And so it's a high output sport. So for most people, that means eating a lot, and probably a lot more than they think. Generally speaking, you want to have, somewhere between 40 to 50% of your intake from carbohydrate. I say generally because some people fall out of that range. Some people feel better a little bit lower. Some people feel better a little bit higher. And it also depends on the phase that you're in. So if you're in like a big training block leading up to a race season, you're going to be a little bit higher in that carbohydrate range. If you're in an off season or not training much, you're focusing on strength or body composition, you're going to be on the lower end. With protein for an ultra runner, I tend to push it up a little bit higher just because there is that wear and tear and turnover. So somewhere between 20 to 30% of total intake, trying to focus on quality proteins. That's kind of the key. And that can be plant-based, but you just have to be a little more intentional about where those proteins are coming from, because most all plant sources have carbohydrate as well. So it's just like a little bit of a balance. And then on top of that, somewhere between 20 to 30% fat. Obviously, it has to add up to 100, and each day is going to be a little different. But those numbers, when I start to talk numbers, oftentimes eyes glaze over because it's like, what does that even mean? Because we're talking about percentages,
Yeah.
and each of those, carbohydrate and protein, are four calories per gram, and fat is 9 calories per gram. So it's not even like you can visually represent that. So instead of like really focusing on the numbers, I kind of give like a ballpark. So, like, okay, roughly half-ish should be carbohydrate, then a little more, like a little less protein, and then even a little bit less fat in terms of volume. But instead, I like to focus on like, what does that look like on a plate? So how do you build a plate?
Right.
And this is where Kelly does this beautifully. But when we can visualize, like the carbohydrate should be, and again, we're talking about like maybe after a run, not before a run. But we can think about a plate and put a bunch of vegetables on there, like roasted vegetables, leafy greens, just a mixture of things, some sort of grain-ish thing on top of that. It could be like rice, couscous, could be bread, it could be polenta, could be a wrap, and then some good quality protein on top of that, and then a little bit of fat drizzled all over it because fat makes everything taste better and it also helps you absorb those nutrients. So that's kind of like a very rough, high level example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I think again, there's no like specific like breakfast you should eat as an ultra runner or composition, but general themes apply to almost all athletes. And just knowing that if you think you're maybe on the lower, or if you're like, most athletes under fuel, in my opinion. And so it's not across the board, but I would say most people benefit from just taking in a little bit more because that energy expenditure piece is so high.
Mm-hmm. When I just interviewed from CTS coach Cliff Pittman, and I was asking him about nutrition, and he says, I recommend all my athletes that they hire that they work with a nutritionist, and I'm seeing exactly why that's so critical to our performance and well-being, especially in this sport that is so demanding in ways that I don't think most of us even recognize. And it's kind of this hidden thing that of just being unlocking something in ourselves to perform better because we think we have an idea of what we need, but it's sounding to me like I don't know a thing about my nutrition. I'm meal planning later today. I'm not putting any thought into my meal plan about what nutrients am I putting on the plate to make sure I get the most out of that. So thank you so much for giving us that great overview about that. And so going to you, Kelly, based off of what Stephanie just shared with us, would like to pick your brain about what should that plate look like, generally speaking. I know it can look different for lots of people. People are vegetarian, vegan, gluten-free, and all sorts of different things. But so I wish we could get into all those aspects, but we just don't have the time for it. It would be a long ass episode if we did. So what should that plate look like, given what Stephanie just shared with us?
Yeah, I think this is actually the topic for that will be in our upcoming Ultra Running magazine column. This particular plate, so the recovery plate, which I is always one of my favorite ones because there's so much good stuff in it. But I would say I'll use something that's just like I'm a big fan of just like putting something in a bowl, or so it's easy to eat. It's easy to make something like presentation wise really beautiful. But um, one thing that always comes to mind, and Scotty, you and I have discussed the chef Yotam Ottolenghi with his book Plenty before, and Stephanie and I are huge fans. Um, but I believe he's Israeli, and one of the things that I love so much about that food is it's bright and colorful and attractive and makes you want to like really dig in, and it's also easy to see. Um, that it's a vehicle for like all the macros and micros. Like it's just like this bounty of things. So I'll use like I'll use, for lack of a better term, the rice bowl for this, but we'll put some different grains in it. So rice, obviously, but there's so many options for that. You could do grains, you could do couscous. Uh, Tabbouleh is a really beautiful like option for it. So if you, let's say, did tabbouleh, and if you have to cook that anyway, like you cook rice. So I would cook that in, you could even go like, instead of cooking it in water, you could cook it in veggie stock or protein stock. That's such a great way to just add more to a grain. And then I always recommend like cook more so you have some in the fridge so you can turn that into another meal, whether that you could do like tabbouleh fried rice, air quotes there, or turn it into a burrito. But you've got, anytime we're making things, like just make a little extra. So if you did tabbouleh cooked in, let's say, chicken stock that also had like a little black pepper and turmeric in it. And then add lots of like dark leafy greens to it, whether it's, spinach or kale, arugula. I also love, Stephanie, I'm assuming like greens from, let's say, like rainbow chard would probably be really beautiful in that as
Mhm.
well, and do the job. Um, and then I would probably throw a good handful of, let's say, pomegranate seeds in there and roasted veggies. I'm on a big salmon kick right now, so about halfway before that tabbouleh's done, I would probably take the lid off and set a piece of salmon in there and let it just steam on top of the rice so I don't have to dirty up another pan and just put the lid on. Um, that's an easy way. And also throw two pieces of salmon in there while you're at it. And then lots of sprouts and seeds. There's so many like little tiny things like broccoli sprouts or radish sprouts when they're growing, when they're that little, they're just packed little powerhouses of like a vehicle of such good stuff as far as micronutrients go. And then, yeah, seeds of any kind or nuts on top, just to kind of tie things up. That's always a great way. And then even just like, you don't have to make a separate vinaigrette for that. You could even just drizzle, like Stephanie had mentioned earlier, like drizzle some oil on top, and squeeze some lemon on there. Give it a taste if you need a little more, salt and pepper to taste. But the seasoning is like sometimes the two or three things as far as a vinaigrette or just that fat and acid on the top can really pack a punch and go a long way.
I'm getting hungry over here. Um, just thinking about that. And this is really going to help with my meal planning for the week to make sure that I've just have these staples of grains and proteins and greens just kind of readily available. I have come to love the frozen veggie section over at Costco, because the cauliflower rice and their stir fry veggies are so delicious and so accessible just to throw into a pan and get a protein going on the side, just to get that benefit. What are some, I guess, I'm a snacker. I love snacking. So what are some really healthy snack options for us as we're kind of, between those meal periods?
Yeah, so I'm just gonna kind of back up and say I don't like to call foods healthy because like they should serve a purpose. I get what you're saying. What are some good choices to make? Because I think like one piece of like a snack is like it should taste good too, so it shouldn't be like healthified. But the first thing is to recognize like what's the purpose of the snack. So is it to tie you over between meals, or is it to wake you up because you're dragging, or are you bored, or are you actually thirsty? So I think it is important to understand the reason behind having a snack.
Mhm.
And If it is because you need some energy between meals, that's great. If it's after a workout and you need something to facilitate recovery, that's a great time to have a snack. If you're crashing and you're reaching for sugar because you're tired, that's probably a factor of you didn't have enough protein at the meal previously, or you're not getting enough sleep, or something else. So I like to make sure that we have like the rationale behind why you're adding a snack. That's kind of dialed in. When you think of a snack, you want it to be somewhat of a mini meal. And by that, I mean, you want to have carbohydrate, fat, and protein. And the reason for that is if you just go for, let's say, the carbohydrate, that's a common snack, like an apple or a piece of candy or just something sweet like that. You're going to feel good for about 15 minutes and then you're going to crash even further. And so, what we want to do is have some fat and protein in there as well so that it's not something that spikes your blood sugar and then makes you crash. And a mini meal tends to be more real food rather than just snacking on something out of a package. And I'm saying like this is ideally what you do, right? You're not going to do that every time. It's okay if you open a bag of chips and just have a bunch of chips. Like that just shouldn't be the majority of your snacking or meals. So if it's after a workout, the key part of that is something that's simple to digest, so it gets into your body quickly. So that's where like protein drink mixes are nice because they have some carbohydrate, they've got some protein, but you can also have real food. Like one of the best things after a workout is actually like a cappuccino or a latte. Tends to be a fan favorite because who doesn't want to drink that in the winter? And the reason is milk is a great food that has all three of those nutrients in them. So if you finish a run, you end at the coffee shop, like that's a great thing to get in post run. If it's, let's say, between meals, I like something like nuts or seeds or nut butter as like kind of a one component because again, it's easy to take with you to work. It's the volume isn't that big because they're pretty dense. And you can pair that with like a piece of fruit or some chocolate or a rice cake or a piece of toast. So once you have kind of like your checklist of what you need, you can kind of like plan it out and mix it up a little bit. And just having things on hand, like nuts, seeds, chocolate, hummus is a good one, avocado is a good one. And then things like crackers, rice cakes, like bread, even like a frozen waffle can be a pretty good one with some peanut butter on it. So that's kind of just some examples of like what it could look like.
The Vans gluten-free frozen waffle with peanut butter is my go-to. I love it.
It's good.
It's delicious
and simple too, right? Uh, Not to interject here, but one thing I think a lot of people assume is that meal prep needs to be complicated or it needs to have like 10 ingredients. It can be super simple. And I'm a fan of taking shortcuts.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a fan of getting frozen vegetables, getting things that make your life easier because you want to eat well, but you don't want to spend 10 hours a day preparing to eat well. And so keep it simple. And like Kelly said, make big batches of things. Like leftovers are a brilliant thing to have in your refrigerator.
I might be the world's slowest chef ever. I cook damn good food, but you're going to wait hours for it. So you may want to avoid my restaurant. So Kelly, now ping ponging to you, when thinking about those, getting this like mini meal put together, that's quick and easy, but it's not going to be like, like a full meal. What would be your recommendation for that so that it's appetizing and we look forward to it?
Yeah. Yeah, as far as we had mentioned like making extra things to keep for leftovers. There's also a lot of power. Like I get so excited when I open the freezer and I'm like, oh, I did put rice in there. I cooked rice, made extra, laid it out flat in a bag and froze it. So now I don't have to make rice. I can just pull that out. Like there's some beauty in that. And like whether it's beans or some sort of grain, like that's a good thing to have around, especially for snack stuff. Like if I'm on the road, I'll do that for my husband because I know I'm always like, what does he eat when I'm gone? So it's good to have this stuff around. So I'll use like the apple and the peanut butter that we talked about, or some sort of nut butter. Like
Mhm.
There's like in the winter, there's something that's really nice and warm about that. Or even like throw just a little like a big kind of heaping tablespoon of like muesli or oats on top of it. So that gives a little more texture too. Um, you could probably throw some seeds or nuts on top of that as well as you wanted to, or if you wanted to. But and the savory one, again, if you have stuff in the fridge, if you've got rice or beans in the fridge, like just pulling like a couple tablespoons of each of those out and warming it up and throwing it on a tortilla. That takes seconds, especially if it's already made.
Um, to you, Stephanie, you have mentioned recovery a few times in this, but what I haven't discussed with this or anybody, it's what is happening to our bodies after a long run in that recovery period, and why is that so important for us to make sure that we're fueling properly in our bodies? What is happening biologically with us when we are getting the right nutrients and when we're not?
Yeah, so I'll keep it kind of high level, and we can deep dive on this topic for probably like a full podcast
Sure.
sometime. But basically, running is a catabolic activity, right? So you're breaking down your body, you're using energy, the stored energy that you have, you're taking in exogenous, which means outside of the body sources of energy, like fuel, basically, to keep your body going, right? To keep energizing so that you can keep running. So when you finish, you're more or less depleted. You can think of it like a gas tank. It's pretty close to empty. And so you have a window of time, and it's not like a hard and fast rule of like a must eat within this period of time, but the sooner you can start to refill that gas tank, the more efficiently and the better you're going to recover. And the reason for that, there is a reason metabolically. So your cells are able to take up glucose independent of insulin when you're exercising, when you're running, biking, walking, swimming, etc., because they need energy. And so when you finish a session, you still have that ability to take up glucose for the next like 30 to 60-ish minutes. And so if you refuel during that time, your muscles are like sponges and they're going to take up all of that basically glucose and store it as glycogen so that you start your next session recovered. If you miss that window, then instead of just going to your muscles, it's going to go to your entire body and it's going to require an insulin response, which isn't a bad thing. It just means that you don't recover as quickly and your gas tank might be 80% full rather than 100%. And so over time, that turns into just like, not feeling as good for the next session and having it be maybe lower quality. It's kind of like a cumulative effect. So the better you can match that, like finish a run, refuel, the better you can recover from like a glycogen glucose standpoint. And then also from a muscle repair standpoint, protein in the recovery meal helps repair some of that damage, right? So the way you get better from training is you break your body down and it builds up stronger. So that's like the whole principle behind training is like you want to break yourself down, but then you have to build yourself back up. And fuel plays a big role in that. Rest and recovery does as well, but you can facilitate a lot of that adaptation by fueling your body correctly.
And does the amount of exertion that we put into our workouts determine when we should be getting that recovery fuel in our bodies? So, like a long weekend run versus just my 1 hour training block during the week.
It changes it, not necessarily in terms of timing, but maybe in terms of importance.
Mm.
So if you're doing an hour or up to 90 minutes, you don't usually use all of your glycogen stores. And so it's not as important for that like midweek hour to 90-minute run to focus on recovery nutrition right after. But for a longer session, it will qualify that as something over 2 hours or an intensity session where you're going at like higher intensity, you've got higher turnover, you're using more energy. that can be shorter. That could be like an hour of interval work.
Mm-hmm.
In those sessions, those quality sessions, it is more important because you want the adaptation and the recovery to come from doing those specific sessions. So when I work with an athlete, I actually look at their training plan and I identify like, okay, so Wednesday, Friday, those are like quality work days. You should really make sure to plan ahead and have a post run like recovery drink or stop somewhere or make sure that you have something that you can refuel with because those days are important. And then the other days we can just kind of like not focus on it as much because I also don't want to turn it into something where it's like every single day it's just like, really strict on like having to like fuel and like think about your timing. And so just identify those key sessions and focus on them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. I know it's a lot to talk about, and I hope we can go deeper on another episode. Kelly, do you have anything there that you want to add to that segment?
Yeah, real quickly, and Scotty, I think you and I have previously discussed this, but the one athlete that Stephanie and I worked with over the summer in France, there were maybe like halfway through the expedition. I think she was just really, she was like, I just don't want to eat or drink the recovery shake after. I'm feeling it like more and more every day. It's something that I'm not looking forward to. She was just getting beat up and it was just a constant thing. So instead of, there was 1 or 2 days where she would have the recovery shake after her workout. And I think she was just like, I'm just going to get it down. So she just like threw it down all at once. And then she was like, I feel like garbage. This isn't working. So that's when I found like a little shot glass and I just kind of sat there with her and gave her one shot at a time. And it took like, 45 minutes for her to get all of it in, but it was just slow enough that it was a little easier for her to manage emotionally and physically. So, every once in a while there's little tricks in there that we have to do and we got it all in. But when we left that expedition, I actually left that little shot glass with her in case that happened again. So it was in her mind, she was like, I could do this one shot. Okay, let's wait a little bit. I'm like, just have a little more. It's kind of like crewing or pacing when you're like, how about just another 20-second burst of something? But we did it with a shot glass for her to kind of get all of it in, and that became much more manageable for her.
Mm-hmm. Stephanie, for you, I kind of want to get like an overview of what it's like for an athlete to work with a nutritionist. Can you kind of walk us through like working with a new athlete who's never worked with one before, a nutritionist, and what are what does that process look like when you're evaluating someone, and and the work that you guys do together? What are you trying to achieve?
Yeah, the first thing I usually do is set up a call with them to find out a little bit more about what they like, why they want to work with me. Because usually they have a few things, and usually on that list is some sort of weight loss or body composition goal. Almost everybody wants, for some reason, we're just not satisfied with our body. So there's like usually a list of things that they want to accomplish. So that kind of frames it up for me of like, okay, so what is this individual looking for? During that call, I'm also trying to learn a lot about their personality. So I'm asking them questions. I'm trying to like, read between the lines because you work with people differently depending on their background and like what they've experienced in the past or their personality. Are they type A? Are they like, what do they like? What kind of foods do they like? So I'm getting all of that information. And then from there, I like to get a baseline of like a snapshot into how they habitually eat. So before we start changing things up, I have them log their food. And that can be, depending on the person, that's not appropriate to log food indefinitely or for a long period of time. So it could just be a couple days or it could be a week. And that tells me a lot. So I get, this log of their food and not just like the numbers, but I'm actually like looking at their patterns, what they're eating, when they're eating. And from there, like I said earlier, what I do is try to find the themes that are good. So I start with that, like, you do a great job with breakfast. Like, let's keep that up. Let's not change a thing. But here's where I think we could make some changes. So in your lunch, you need to add some protein. So how about we add like a chicken or a salmon or a cup of black beans, like with your lunch. So it's very individual on like what they need. But from there, the thing with nutrition is it's so different from training where it's not like you just do the behavior once, right? So, like, I work as a coach as well. I love the athletes that I coach, and like I give them a training plan and they do the workout, I respond to it, and then we move on. With eating, it's like hundreds of decisions a day. So, it's not just like you do the behavior once and then you just can like wait till the next day. There's like you have to think about it so many times. You eat throughout the day. You're thinking about food prep. You're thinking about you're hungry. You're thinking about you're full. You're thinking about what Instagram is telling you about, like, you should eat this, you should drink this.
Yeah.
So it's really more, it's so much more than anything else we do in our lives. So a lot of that is me just listening to athletes, to their concerns, to how they're feeling. I mix up fueling and feeling a lot because they're very similar, but listen to how they're fueling and feeling, because there's a lot that I can learn that can help them. So it's not just like an easy like, okay, here's what you're eating, here's your numbers, let's just like fill in the blanks. It's like, let's figure out your goals, let's figure out what's holding you back from your goals, let's figure out like what you're eating and how can we work on that on a day-to-day basis and get you moving in the right direction, because it also doesn't happen overnight. That's maybe the frustrating thing with nutrition is like you have to just stay the course and stay the course and like change one small thing and then stay the course and see if it changes. So it can be a little frustrating at times, but when you get to that point where you learn how to fuel and you feel good, then it's like this positive like reinforcement. Like Kelly was mentioning earlier, the athlete that we worked with, she felt that positive like energy of like, wow, I actually, when I eat enough, I feel good, I feel recovered. And it's just like this empowering moment when an athlete gets that like light bulb that goes on, and that just kind of is like the tipping point for me of like, okay, we're going down the right path now, let's keep it going. um and I think pretty frequent communication is important. So I like to jump on the phone like weekly or bi-weekly with an athlete, or just get like, a message update from them, because lifestyle behaviors are hard to change. They're so hard. If you have a habit, to break your habit, it like takes a lot of like conscious thought to have it become like second nature. And so there's a lot of like support needed during that time.
Wow. Yeah. This the psychology aspect of nutrition. Uh, you're almost acting like a therapist in some regards.
Yeah.
Of so many. I put so much emotion into what I'm putting into my body, or there's a lot of emotion behind what I'm putting into my body, whether it's like having a stressful day, you know, feeling lazy, not wanting to do the extra steps and what's quick and easy. And we have such an instant gratification sort of life now, more so than ever in our human evolution, of just like putting something in my mouth and not even really looking at the ingredients. Like, am I even caring what I'm putting into my body right now? And it's talk about discipline and the role that discipline plays in nutrition. It's got to be one of the hardest things I think that you can do, until you create the habit.
Yeah, 100%. And a lot of times food isn't really about food. Like, so yeah, I do a lot of listening in my work.
Wow. So
Dottie, can I interrupt real quick?
I was just going to go to, yes, go right ahead.
I have an example. I don't know if Stephanie even remembers this, but we had a client that both of us were working with. Stephanie was her RD, and I was going to go on the road with this client. And I had worked with her for a couple years prior. So I had spent weeks on end with this client, and there were a lot of just GI issues that were just constant, that like ruled everything. So for anyone that's listening to this podcast, if and when you make the decision to hire an RD, I cannot stress how much communication of just total transparency of your daily habits is paramount, not just food, but drink as well. Stephanie and I were talking, and she's like, I just don't know. I think the biggest thing for this next project that we're doing for this athlete will be like handling this big GI issue. And then she was like, these are the things that she had mentioned to me. And one day I said, Stephanie, did she mention to you the copious amounts of hot tea that she intakes on a daily basis? And Stephanie was like, absolutely not. I had no idea. And she was like, so it's basically just like a constant flow of hot liquids through our um, GI tract and intestinal system is at large. Like it was setting the table for the results. And the closer this athlete would get to these big expeditions, which could be really stressful, especially getting up to that starting point. Um, Hot tea was like a comfort for her. So the more stressed out she got, the more hot tea she would have, and the more hot tea she would have, the obvious result was the same GI distress. So we were immediately just like, oh my gosh, of course. Of course, it's just like a hose through our bodies of hot liquids. So of course, this is what's going to happen. So we very quickly, because Stephanie and I had communicated, uh, and this one thing had been left out, not intentionally, but the athlete probably thought, well, it's not quote unquote food in the solid form, so I don't need to really mention it's not. No one had really thought about it until we did. And then that one conversation changed, I think, 90%, Stephanie, of probably the huge GI issues that we're having. And all of a sudden, everything was so much more manageable. So I cannot stress enough to to communicate as honest as possible with whatever RD you hire.
And honestly,
Yes.
we've seen it all. Nothing shocks me. So the person you're working with will be professional about it, but also know that they have seen probably everything that there is to see. So not being ashamed of what you put in your body is an important part.
Yeah. Um, you guys just consider this, all right? Starting a Netflix series like Real Athlete Detectives of trying to unlock what's wrong with someone's performance and really drilling down to it and finding the solution. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that anecdote or testimonial. Um, so for you, Kelly, we talked to Stephanie about what it's like to work with nutritionists and what one should expect. When working with you, why do runners come to you at Real Athlete Diets there in Boulder? And what kind of work do you do with them?
It's a few things. So I'll do, local events for businesses, and then I might do like a brand or an athlete manager might hire me for a team training camp or athlete summit. So I'll spend, a week or two on the road with them. Um, there's a very select kind of, when I say select, small group of like, I don't know, 3 to 5 at the most people, athletes that I work with that I'll do. I hesitate to say individual meals because I don't, if someone's just like, I want to hire you to do individual meals, more often than not, my answer will be no. And the reason that I do say yes to an athlete is when they already have kind of a therapeutic team set up. So for them, it's not just hiring me as a private chef, it's hiring me to work with their registered dietitian or their coach or fill in the blank rest of the team. And I'm creating food around their sport and their professional athleticism. So it's not just hiring me. Like if a dentist was like, hey, I want to hire you to make individual meals for me while I train for an Ironman. I would probably say no to that unless that particular athlete truly allowed me access to know everything. Because I that's kind of how I create the food. It's with full access of knowing what they want. It's not just me as a private chef. It's much bigger than that. So I'll work with professionals in that way. Or I'll go on the road. My favorite work, honestly, Scotty, is to go on the road on long expeditions with an athlete who is purpose driven. It's usually like an environmentally focused project where they need to be on the road for a few weeks at a time and they're using their sport to help gain information to tell a story about the environment. And so they need someone on the road to feed not just their team, but to feed them and then to also troubleshoot, not just to create food for them or make meals for them, but to troubleshoot dietary issues that come up along the way, to kind of keep things on track, to keep their weight at bay, meaning like, uh, when you're doing something for 60 days in a row, chances are if you're not fueling properly, you're going to become emaciated and unhealthy and lose a lot of weight. So my goal is to keep them at a healthy fitness level through food. That's my favorite kind of work to do.
Wow, that sounds adventurous, to do that type of work, these expeditionary kind of purpose-driven, you know, I don't know what to call it, events or, um, but do you find yourself like having to, when you go and create a meal plan for said athlete on wherever you're going, that you're using locally sourced um, produce and proteins? So are you having to kind of adjust what that meal plan looks based on where you're going?
Yes, because it's movable, right? Again, I'll use the France trip from this past year. It was a source to sea project from the start of the Seine River all the way to where it emptied out into the shores of Normandy. So it was constantly moving. So I'll show up with a lot of dry goods, so like rice, grains, beans, that sort of thing. Um, and then buy produce and protein along the way. I don't meal plan at all. There's no sense in me meal planning because everything changes every day and 5 times a day.
Mhm.
And I'm fortunate to have background in professional restaurants where if you don't adapt on the fly and just constantly sort of create your best work under fire, you don't survive that industry. So that's been a huge tool in my toolbox that makes it really easy for me to manage long expedition work because there's no like I don't meal plan ever. I might see like radishes being sold on the side of the road, and my entire meal is now on this romantic radish. That's more of how my brain works.
I love a good radish. That's just me. I love them so much. So Stephanie, what works for you nutritionally? Just wanting to know what works for a nutritionist. I'm so curious to hear that question answer.
When I meet people for like the first time, or I'm at a party and they're like, "What do you do?" I say I'm an accountant because if I say I do nutrition, everyone's like, "What do you eat?" Or they follow me around and like watch what I eat all day. So I love this question. Honestly, I just eat food. I mean, I obviously know how to put together a well-balanced meal, but I love food. I love flavor. I love things that taste good. Living in France has been wonderful because most of my favorite foods are here. So I'm not going to go through a day and like break down exactly what I eat because I guarantee you people will try to mimic it, and that is not how food should work. But I eat plenty of food throughout a day. I really like my French croissants or my French pain au chocolat. Those are usually make an appearance once during my day. I'm not shy about dessert. And again, being in France is wonderful because I get a tarte myrtille, which is a blueberry tart, or a flan. I would say most days as well. And then I drink plenty of coffee, plenty of cappuccinos. And I mean, I eat real food too. Like I love like a roast chicken, salmon is a favorite with a lot of like roasted vegetables. That's kind of a good pairing for me. Always bread and cheese. I kind of get panicky if I don't have a fresh baguette. Like, where am I? What are we going to eat? We don't have any bread right now. I mean, I'm just a fan of real food, and I love throwing things together with like, some sort of vegetables or throw an egg on top of it, or what's in season. I work off of that a lot. Or what do I walk by at the grocery store that looks good? And I think people perceive that I eat really quote unquote healthy, but I eat normal. Like I like candy, I like chocolate, I like, things that maybe you don't assume can fit into a good eating pattern, but they can. It's just that you have to like surround those things with nutrient dense food as well. So start your day off with like a big bowl of oatmeal with some whole milk and an egg. And then yeah, maybe you have a pain chocolat after your workout, which is kind of my favorite thing to do. And then lunch is maybe nice leftovers, like some roasted vegetables, maybe some leftover chicken, avocado. I usually do a goûter in the afternoon, which is traditionally like bread, like a baguette with some chocolate, really good butter and sea salt. Delicious.
Oh
And
man.
then dinner, my favorite food is pizza, which again is like easy to come by here. But pair that with like a nice arugula salad and maybe a glass of wine. And then, yeah, maybe like some sort of like chocolatey dessert thing in the evening. And I try not to overthink it, but I do follow my hunger cues. And that's easy to say when you are an intuitive eater. When you're not, you have to kind of teach yourself how to listen to them. But when I'm hungry, I eat. And some days I'm a lot more hungry than other days. And I also don't dwell on the fact that like I'll just be honest, right before this podcast, I had like a bag, not a whole bag, but like I opened up a bag of Haribo candies. It was like just like, pumping myself up for this conversation, like mid-afternoon. But those things are okay. And you just can't dwell on them. Like eat well most of the time and the rest of the time, just like enjoy it and then like move past it.
Um, Kelly, I want to get to you in just a second. I've got a question for you, but Stephanie, what brought you to France?
Long story, but I will say I've always loved France. I've kind of been obsessed with it since like 2014, Chamonix specifically, because I came over here to run UTMB and just like I've always loved it. I've loved the time I've spent here. One of my best friends, actually two best friends, Roy Bazio and then Fernanda Maciel, the three of us would just hang out and I had such great memories. And now Fernanda and I both live here. So it was kind of just like just something I wanted to have happen and made it happen.
Yeah. How do you still keep in touch with Bozio?
Yeah,
How how
actually,
is he?
so we have children born on the same day,
Get
which
out.
if you would have asked me that like 10 years ago or said like you and Rory will both have you will have children and they will share a birthday, I would have never believed you.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, she's doing great. She's got a 1-year-old and she's living in Tahoe and super happy and
Oh,
just, doing Rory things.
I'm so happy to hear that. I interviewed her a long time ago. I think after she won UTMB, and yeah, she's such a great spirit. I love her. Her energy is just infectious, and gosh dang it, uh,
She's the best.
be like Rory, man. I should get a T-shirt like Rory. Um, Kelly, I'm curious. Talking to a chef and quite an accomplished one at that. You've done some really amazing things in your lifetime and continue to. Um, and but from someone of your caliber, uh, what things are always in your damn fridge?
Oh gosh. I think the one thing that most people comment on when they see me open the fridge is, oh my gosh, you have so many condiments. And I think that's probably a chef thing. Like, I think maybe on average we probably have 8 to 10 different kinds of mustard. And then backups in the cupboard. Uh, I always have some sort of sprouts. I'm really lucky in the Boulder area to we've got just so many small farms, so there's always someone growing something really neat. Um, Greens. I'm sort of a green addict. Like my go-to breakfast is a salad with eggs. So we always have, I don't know, probably 2 to 4 different kinds of salad greens.
Uh,
Um, I actually really love kale, so we always have kale. Really good eggs. Again, I recognize, especially right now, that that's really a clutch piece of
it really
thing to
is
have.
like gold
Yeah.
bars in my fridge right now.
Um, like Stephanie, and one of the things that I love working with Stephanie is because she is such a foodie herself. So it makes it really fun for us to just talk food, not just nutrition, but food, which keeps it like that's such a key to keep things excited. But pickles, my gosh, we always have, I don't know. Yeah, pickles and condiments, sauerkraut, kimchi. I think that I put that on my salad every morning, and it just really helps my stomach and gut. Did I say chocolate? Chocolate's always in our house. Lots of chocolates. Um, yeah. And then I just really like I don't meal plan. It's really about what excites me when I walk into the produce section or a farm. I'm like, oh my gosh, I must have this. And then everything just sort of blooms around that. So protein's to plug and play with. And then I know on top of our fridge right now, there's a 10-pound bag of brown basmati rice. Yeah. Random stuff, all weirdo chef stuff. It's
Weirdo
probably
chef
that.
I
stuff.
love it.
That's the title of your new next cookbook is weirdo chef stuff. I would buy it. I would totally buy it. Or have you done,
Yeah.
you've co-written lots of cookbooks. Have you done one that's just authored by yourself?
No, and in fact, Stephanie and I, that's our big pie in the sky project. So my next one will also not be authored by myself because we'll be co-authored with Stephanie.
Oh,
So whenever that comes to fruition, we're like working on so many different parts of it, but I have not. Yeah.
I'm
Someday.
buzzing with excitement at the idea of you guys doing a cookbook. Oh my God.
Yeah.
So great. You know, while I have you both here, I just want to share, personally speaking, that I have two stepchildren that are kind of connected to you, sort of just area based where you've been. For you, Stephanie, you did some time over at Oregon State University.
Mhm.
I have a stepdaughter who is in the master's program for the forestry department over
Oh,
there,
cool.
doing amazing work out there. And she is going to be someone. She is someone already, but she's got a lot of work ahead of herself to keep our forests healthy and people safe. So, a shout out to OSU.
They've got a great forestry program there.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, and then for you, Kelly, a stepson goes to CU Boulder. I call it our expensive like away camp. He is skiing in the winter, rock climbing in the summer, but just his ever coming back home. He's gonna stay in Boulder the rest of his life, I am sure. So yeah,
Nice. There's worse places to live.
oh my gosh. He is so happy out there. We're so happy for him. I love Boulder area. It's just beautiful and beyond anything. If you've never been, you must go. Stephanie, for you in France, which part of France are you in?
I'm in Chamonix.
Oh my gosh. Um, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, to be in Chamonix next year for UTMB. Or I talked to my honey about it. I'm like, honey, what do you think about going to France? She's like, for running. I'm like, yeah, but you get to sit and eat cheese and bread and drink wine while I run. It sounds like a great, thing. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah, it's pretty great over here. Like that's not an exaggeration. You can totally do that and fit right in.
Um, well, Stephanie Howe and Kelly Newlon, their article in our latest issue of UltraRunning magazine, which is our UROY issue, Ultras Around the Year, article's titled "Breakfast Becomes You." I went and I bought all the ingredients to make the one of these recipes in here. I'm so excited about. You two are an absolute delight. I can see why you're friends and why you've got an amazing future together. I'm so glad that the universe has brought you two together. So it's great. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
for having
you.
us.
You got it. Let's do it again.